This is an audio production of Hunter of the Setting Sun by N.N. Shepherd. Music by Josiah Fursanetti. Cover art by Levi Bushnell. Editing by Josiah Fursanetti and Levi Bushnell. Read by the author. Hunter of the Setting Sun. Episode 3. The digging and burying had taken all of the morning, and by the time Emmond was riding beneath the wood arch of Dara, the sun was an hour past overhead. The road branched off early to ride south into the mountains, and he did little to guide Whisper, the horse remembering the way from the night before. The pair rode in silence, Emmond not pushing the steed any faster than he wanted to go, giving him enough rein to move as he pleased. As anxious as he was to find Relvin, he wanted time to organize himself. A hunt was not wise when the hunter was rushed. Patience was always key. But patience let him think of her, and that did little to settle his thoughts. Whisper reached the fork in the path, one way looping around the side of the mountain, the other turning up a steep slope before passing out of sight around a cutback. Slowing Whisper to a walk, he slipped from the saddle and draped the reins on the pommel and walked beside the mount until they reached the first steps of the new path. Emmond stopped and turned to the right, to the north, looking out through the trees to the valley below. It spread far and wide, looking far larger than it was, the town even seeming bigger somehow. Dara was a tenth the size of Wythe, and from what he remembered, Wythe was half the size of Harbin Point. There were perhaps 2 or 3 dozen families in Dara, many of them related somehow, at least distantly. Farmers mostly, though there were trappers and fishermen, as well as various trades, like Master Samuel the smith. As he stood there, overlooking it all, he realized that none of them had come to his side. Not one of them had spoken to him or given him a good word. Not one was against the white robes as he was, and even if they weren't bold enough to stand out. Sure, there were a few women about that morning, and Master Samuel had been preparing his forge, but where was Jory Alder, or Mivan Rushton, or the Grind brothers? Men he might have called friends once. Jory was a trapper like him, and Rushton kept bees and grew vegetables. His wife had a keen knack for curing and pickling, and the Grind boys had the largest herd of sheep and goats in the valley. They had smoked pipes with Emmond at his home, had helped him break Whisper when the horse was young, had traded goods for pelts, and he had helped them. Looking out, he could see the fence line where the Grind brothers kept their stock, the fence he had helped mend. There was the Rushton vegetable yard with the straw scarecrows that Rem and Leo had helped fill. And somewhere out there in the southern forest, just below Emmond, might have been Jory Alder, tending traps that they had built together. None of them had stood for him. None of them had tried to save his wife or even the Alguain man. None of them dared to stand before the servants. "You let this happen," Emmond said to the sky, pulling his eyes from the valley. "You let her die. Is this your justice?" He looked away, ashamed, sorry for what he had said, but at the same time so angry with the potter and his lack of intercession. Where had Emmond gone wrong? He was a man, and that meant providing and keeping your family. Had he not done so? He was gone for long periods of time, and that was not easy on Eva or the children. This he knew, but it was a path that he had laid out for her before they married, and she had agreed then. She had not complained in their years together. She had not wished for something else for them. He thought they had been happy. If not happy, at least content. Were the two not so close after all? He stood at the fork, just one step down the path that would wind and turn and come to an end he was unsure of, watching the valley below and the home he had known for the past decade. It was their home, and it felt distant now, so far away. It was broken, and he knew he was not trying to fix what was, but perhaps put a stop to the flood, if it were so possible. That was all. He turned back to Whisper and clicked again, starting the horse on. The sound of hooves came up the road behind him, and he stopped walking, turning to watch the bend, waiting for his son to come along on the old mare. Emmond's first instinct was to shout and yell at the boy, to curse at him and tell him to return, that he wasn't a man and that he should stay as young as he could for as long as he could, for nothing came of age but pain. But he held in the shouts and yells and calmed himself, and when the red roan turned the corner of the road at a gentle trot, he found the rider to not be his son at all, and all of the gust thinned out of him. She slowed her horse just behind Whisper and looked down at him from above. Long golden hair, so fair and near white in the afternoon sun, tied down in 2 braids that each hung over her right shoulder. A riding dress of all black with a coat of black wool to match. No bonnet or hat covered her head, though she wore dark makeup around her eyes and on her lips. The colors made her skin even more pale, but she seemed more healthy and certainly more clean than she had the night before. Emmond thought, as though it had been days instead of just hours, that she looked much like her sisters. "What is your plan?" Catriona asked. Emmond shook his head. "Going alone." "He killed my husband as well," the woman from the jail said. She moved her horse up alongside him, and he could see bruises on her knuckles and broken nails at the ends of her left hand, things he hadn't noticed the night before. There was a bruise across her right cheek as well, though faint and maybe hidden by powder. "You're not a hunter," he told her. "You're not a killer," she countered. Emmond shook his head again and mounted Whisper, clicking him into a walk. "I've not a mind to share this road with another." "Then let me pass. I'll ride for him quicker without you." He looked sideways at her as she matched her own step to Whisper's stride. "You would take the satisfaction from me? Rob the duty of a husband? And what of my duty?" Find another man and move on. Is that what you deem the course of a widow? No pain and no sorrow, simply move to another bed with a new husband and forget? What else is there? She didn't hesitate. Revenge. Emmond barked a laugh that held no humor, and he noticed, in a split portion of a second, that finding humor in anything would be tough. This is justice, not vengeance. To be so tied to the former creates the latter, she argued. I would not ride with you, Emmond said, stopping his horse quickly. Whisper tossed his head, his eyes watching the roan as the woman stopped as well, just ahead. Have you been to Harbin Point? Catriona asked, turning her horse to the side, moving in a way that now barred his path. Yes. Her eyes narrowed. When? In truth, it had been many years. A commission had gone out into the east and southern lands for an architect to construct a clock tower that could be seen across the flatlands. The plains to the west were so vast and wide, reaching out beyond the horizon for days and days, or so the travelers would say, for no one that Emmond knew had traveled across. He was a young boy when the commission reached Wythe, and his father laughed at the idea of such a clock tower. Height would not matter, he had said. It would be size, and no such size could be made. Besides, he had added, the mountains disappear across the plains, so how much more would a tower? Yet still, the man had taken the job. It was 4 years of work, Emmond's father spending much of his time in Harbin Point away from his family, only coming home briefly and usually with a need for something related to the project rather than for the sole purpose of seeing his family. It was these 4 years, Emmond only being a boy of 6, when he spent so much of his time in the forests around Wythe that he learned of his love for the hunt. As the clock tower came to a close nearing Emmond's 11th year, his father took the Sarren family west through the valleys and lowlands, out across the pass below Startop Mountain, and into the emptying and picturesque town of Harbin Point. Emmond could only remember it as a sprawling metropolis, cities within cities, towers and buildings and houses and multiple markets and fountains, and above it all, a gray and red tower standing strong in the midst. Surely it would reach the other side of the plains. But he was 11, and nearly 2 decades had passed since he had watched the tower cheer on his father as the man turned the key at the tower's base for the first time, allowing entrance to the men who would keep the time. It has been many years, Emmond admitted to the widow, but I know where I will find Relvin. It was not but 3 months hence that I entered Harbin Point, the woman said. You may think you know the course, but you cannot know it as I do. Ride alone or stand here on the road, you will be a fool, but ride with another who knows the way, and perhaps we will both find what we seek. Emmond pressed Whisper forward and turned until they were sitting abreast, their horses turned sideways in the road. If they had looked away from each other, they would have seen the valley spread out below them, silent and patient, waiting for leaves to run away, chased by the fearful dread of winter. If you know so well where you must go, of what use am I to you? She pointed to the bare spear on his saddle. I know what you are, Emmond Sarren, she said. I know you are a hunter. I am on a hunt. You are one of the daughters of June Olach, he said. I know your name, but I do not know you. She bowed slightly, holding the side of her riding skirt as though giving a small curtsy. Catriona Alguaine, charmed, certainly. When she lifted her head, there was a keen smile there, the black lips wide and her darkened eyes shining. It was a haunting look, Emmond thought, one of mirth, but deeply marked by mourning. Would you not hunt with me, great slayer? Emmond opened his mouth to reply, then paused for a second, thinking. What use would there be of this woman? Surely she was bound to seek absolution the same as he. Surely her blood boiled with the hatred of this servant. Yet what advantage would Emmond have riding with her as his second? Yes, it was true that he did not know Harbin Point like she must, and he supposed that that alone gave her value. But he did not desire a companion. He wished to embark alone, to slay the beast alone, and return to his family, also alone. Yet she was offering help, and in that help brought working as a unit, and he was a solitary hunter. Only rarely had he hunted with others, and those had only ever been his brothers or father, not a strange woman stricken by grief. He knew little of the Olach family and Master June's daughters, prominent though they were in the valley. June had died young in a farming accident, with only the 2 eldest sisters being married at that point. He had traveled much of the land, selling the wares of his family, the crops spreading far and wide away from Dara. It was said that the girls had all traveled with him when he sold, and they became so well known to the buyers that when the man died, it only made sense for them to take his place on the selling floor, representing his well-earned, honest memory. So it was that as the women were married, the men worked the fields and the sisters sold the reap. They were clever and convincing, so it was told, and knew their crops and wares as well as anyone. I will kill him when he is found, Emmond told her without leaving room for convincing. She nodded once, though he thought the gesture had little truth behind it. We must find him first. Emmond matched her single nod, and the pair turned their horses at once, setting off at a smooth canter, a speed that was easy for the horses and loud enough to prohibit talking. Emmond made up his mind that she would be valuable as long as he decided, and when that term ended, he would not carry her weight any longer. He was still riding alone, she just happened to be there as well. He would find Horace Relvin and take what he stole from Emmond. Then, Emmond would confront his god, one problem at a time. Catriona knew much. They rode through the afternoon and evening of the first day away from Dara and camped for the night off the road in a small grouping of pines. The boughs were low and wide, and it only took Emmond a short time with his hand axe to clear the underbrush and lower limbs of the trees, setting up a comfortable camp for the night. Catriona talked for much of it. She told of Horace Relvin, what she knew of the man, and how he had been a friend with her husband Henrik. She told of her knowledge of the clay servants, of the Cathars monastery, of the white robes, and even of Sage Benjamin. Some of what she told him of their religion he knew. He had attended the weekly services when he could with his family, but there was much he didn't know, and much of what she said seemed to dip into a realm beyond the truthful and perhaps into the speculative. Emmond didn't care much for rumors and whispered stories, but he let her talk, only interjecting when she asked questions or made a claim so beyond his comprehension. She did not speak as a town gossip, one of the old women who survived on secrets and worry. No, he found that she spoke almost as a scholar, relaying the information she held in a light of personal study, as though teaching him, but viewing him as an equal all the same. She said nothing of her husband's guilt, agreeing with the adultery consensus or not. For Emmond's part, he said nothing of Eva either. When Catriona spoke of Relvin and spoke of his relationship with her husband, Emmond focused more, trying to measure out the depth of her pain. But either there was none, or she was so in control of her placid mask that no emotion slipped. It was all ordered numbers, lines and lines of fact. She put no personal bias into little or any of her words. She had built a fire with dry brush and began preparing the meal while Emmond cleared and prepared their bedrolls, fetching more firewood as well. The nights had grown cold in preparation for what was coming, and Emmond didn't want the flame to die as they slept. All the while, Catriona spoke. Emmond slept little that night, not for lack of warmth, but for lack of Eva. It had been 2 days since her death, and still Relvin was alive. He felt the failure of his role as her husband and protector, ignoring the pang of hurt from her potential indiscretion for the time being, letting himself only be consumed with the loss. He still could not sleep without her. There was a place at his side that had fit her so well, and though he found himself huddled next to his packs on the ground, they made a poor exchange for her shape and her warmth. He watched the fire and found her face in the embers, alive and hale this time. The gruesome mask she wore as he first found her was gone, hidden somewhere else in his mind. The only sight he could conjure was that of her at the small cook stove in their home, having him taste the berry pie she had made as a new wife. She laughed as his face twisted from the sour taste, laughed as he forced her to try the pie herself, laughed as he had held her and kissed her and melted into his arms, and they forgot the pie for a time, until it burned on the stove and sent smoke roiling, pale and unclear, into their bedroom, taking the finish from them. Emmond could remember telling her to hold her breath, but she had only laughed and pushed him away, running to the kitchen with nothing on and fetching a pail of water to toss the pie in. She was an angel. Her laugh was the music of creation, holding more power over the world than all of the immortal clay or the sparks of dawn. The small amounts of sleep Emmond found that first night were painful and joyful, remembering the love but knowing it was no more. They rode onward the next day as the light rose across the valley and down along the mountain path. They walked alongside their horses at first, letting the animals warm to the chill morning air, their breaths coming out in large puffs of steam as though they were old tempest dragons 1,000 years ago, striding across the land with dominion and power. Catriona was silent as they walked, her head only visible across Whisper's neck, the blonde hair still tied in 2 braids, both still over her right shoulder. "What is the ascension?" Emmond asked, watching her head turn toward his voice, though her eyes were still hidden behind Whisper. "Do you not know?" came her reply. He started to make a snarky answer, but held himself. "Assume I know nothing." He watched as she raised up on the tips of her toes so that her eyes were just over the pommel. They were shining with mischief. "I don't have to assume what I know," she said. He took it without rebuttal and waited for her answer. It was only a moment, though it was a moment longer than he anticipated. She hadn't been short on words since she first rode up to him at the mountain fork. "All power must return to God. The potter does not waste his clay. Twice a year, the clay servants, the local leaders of each church, must travel to the nearest temple and ascend, spend time reflecting back their powers to heaven, giving the clay to the wheel." "Actual clay?" She paused again. "There is no actual clay, not in creation sense, no. It is gone, used up, spent at the inception of this place, infused with the sparks of dawn to emit life, us, the trees, those that live and die. From such and to such, as the proverb relates. No, clay is used as a metaphor now, though long out of use in a literal sense. Yet, prayer remains strong in a form of power to the potter. The prayers may even present as tangible to some, words of conference between the low folk of the world, passed through the servant and then gathered to ascend to God. He imparts them on our behalf, not fully pure, but more pure, and so then able to commune with the holy, to give back the praise we give for what we are given." "And what must these servants do?" Emmond asked, unsure how much of the information he was retaining. "Come to my side?" she asked, her voice soft in the morning chill. Without breaking the horse's stride, Emmond slipped under Whisper's neck, all while guiding him a little to the side so as to make space between the horse and Catriona. She nodded to him as he fell in step alongside her, and he noticed for the first time that morning how the black shadows around her eyes were smudged and ran in bleary streaks down her cheeks. He made no comment of it. "It is 3 days," she went on, looking away from him to the road. 3 days of prayer and supplication, speaking with the potter, closed off from the world, hidden in the temple alone. Alone? She looked at him, and Emmond thought he read on her face the same thing he felt. "Yes, that was my plan," she admitted to his unasked question. "You're a woman." She bit her tongue and squinted her eyes at him, and though he didn't fully understand the look, it seemed very childish to him all of a sudden. Yes, very astute. You won't be allowed in the temple, Emmond clarified. Her next look told him that she knew what he meant. Yes, but I have you. It was Emmond's turn to pause. Had this been her plan all along? Was there any part of her that really thought she could catch and kill Horace Relvin by herself? Or was she simply hoping that she could catch Emmond on the road and take him with her, having him act as her personal warrior? He felt dirty about it, wondering if it was her true motive. What if I had not gone on this journey? How will you enter the temple? She asked, ignoring the question. What if you had not caught me on the road? He asked back. You are not a servant, you are not a sage, and you are not a seer. And though you hunt, you are no sworn either. You are not in any— Yes, I know, he cut in, stopping her quick description of each office of the white robes. I will sneak in, wearing the attire of the cloth, assuming the position of a servant, taking my own ascension. Would I not be able to disguise myself the same? There are no women in the hand of God. She shrugged. It will be no issue. You do not look very manly. Ah, so you can conjure a kind word from time to time. He ignored the jest. Your hair alone would betray you, he said. If they could see past your lack of height and slight frame, that is. I am strong for a woman, she said, adding the last part with a small smile. And there are short men in this world, you must know. I am not so great in stature, Emmond admitted, but there is a difference. Surely your plan was not simply to walk into the temple as a man. She started to answer, but then stopped, staring at him instead. Why are you on this quest? To avenge the death of my wife. She lay with my husband. He lay with her, Emmond cut back before he could stop himself. He shook his head before adding, so they say. Blame rests equally, I think. Yes, he agreed. And you hold no resentment towards her? It was the same question that others had placed before him. Why could they not understand that he could only approach one facet of the event at a time? Kill the murderer, seek understanding from his God, resolve his feelings with Eva in that order. If it was true and Eva had sinned, he did not believe it would change his course of action. He would still have wished for a chance at forgiveness, but that chance was gone, and only justice for the murderer remained. One piece and then another, or he would go mad. You believe Relvin's tale? You have so little faith in your husband's love? He watched her as he spoke, watched the set of her eyes and the slight twist of her dark lips. Our relationship, Catriona began, but her words faded to silence and she shook her head. I would say nothing more. Emmond could understand that. And you? She asked. Resentment or disbelief? Emmond shrugged and looked away. I'd not speak of it. Our road to Harbin Point is long. Would silence be our shared companion the whole way? I would prefer it. It seems that I cannot fault you in the same manner. She looked at him, her eyes dark and hidden behind the smeared shadow paint, her lips tight and drawn, the pale skin of her cheeks flushed with cold in the morning air. There was something fierce in her face, something strong and fearless, a look that Emmond couldn't measure as he had only just met the woman. Yet it was not a look he particularly enjoyed. There was something unspoken that betrayed the drunken woman in the jail, betrayed even the tear streaks on the face that had stared out at him. She was more than she showed, and Emmond wasn't sure he wanted to find the truth behind the facade. Silence it shall be, she said finally, looking away from him. So on they walked. The night came and the morning rose, and the two carried on toward the border town. Emmond asked about Relvin. He is old, older than many of the scribes in the monastery, and even older than Sage Benjamin, I think, Catriona told him. He took a liking to my father, for some reason I could not tell, for my father cared little for the creation god, or for any other gods for that matter. He was a man of the now, of the seen, and had little time for what could not be proved. Perhaps his lack of faith is what Relvin found so compelling. He was always kind to me as a young girl, and seemed to continue the kindness to Henrik when we were married, and to my children when they were born. Never once did I think him cruel enough to act as he has. How could he kill someone he was so close to? She shook her head. He was not simply close to Henrik and our family, Emmond. He was family, in many senses of the word. I spent much time with Relvin in the past. He would journey with me on business, taking a seat in my wagon as I would travel to sell or procure a future sale. Always he was kind, and always he had the greatest and most unbelievable stories. You talk as though you miss him, Emmond scoffed. I do miss him, and I cannot understand what has happened. The dawn light was just peeking over the trees as they trotted along, and Emmond could hardly see the shape of her face in the dim light. You wish to talk to him, not kill him, he accused. I wish to know what changed. What changed? He must have borne some terrible secret that your husband found, and my Eva stumbled upon as well. She looked hard at him. Is that your assumption of the story? I prefer it to the alternative. There is no one above such a sin. Emmond laughed a single harsh bark. Then why go on this hunt? Truly, if you believe your husband lay with my wife, then has their sin not properly been measured? So you would allow for Relvin's actions? You see justice in the lives he took? Emmond laughed bitterly. No, but I understand his righteous fanaticism, if such a sin took place. But he was never so fanatical before, she said. Other sins, we have all sinned against the white law, and there was nothing but reproach and understanding and forgiveness. Never once did Relvin hint at flat murder, resolving the sin before the accused were given a chance to confess and be charged. He took that choice from them. This is not the action of Horace Relvin, not the man that I knew. So you wish to talk to him? Emmond asked again. Yes, firstly, she admitted. Have you no wonder? He thought for a moment, really trying to ponder her question. Did he wonder? Did he care what the man had to say for himself? What lines of old text he would cite that would justify, in his own mind, the death of his wife? Would it matter if Emmond even found some way to agree with a cause? He still must die. There was only that. No, Emmond didn't think he did wonder. I will kill him regardless of his motive, holy or devious, regardless of sin. Light broke fully over the trees and lit their path, and the road bent around a turn in the forest, and a tower made of man lifted into the morning sky. Emmond remembered it and knew that he would know the tower anywhere, in any town, among any grouping of clock towers. It rose like a spear above the forest line, high and proud, widening as it reached toward the land, narrowing to the top, which turned quickly to a point, flat-side, steep and tall, rising into the sky. The black iron of the timepiece could be seen from where they rode, though the arms were too far away to really make out. Emmond had never been much for knowing the exact hour of a day anyway. The sun rose and it was morning, set and it was evening. That was enough. Harbin Point, Catriona announced as they rode on, a quickened pace added unconsciously to the horse's steps. We will see the gates in a moment. And only a moment later did the red walls rise and break from the nature of the forest, spreading out in front of them down the long road that had decided to straighten out just at the end of their journey. The large black gate reminded Emmond of the Catherine's monastery high on Startop Mountain, a day's ride behind them. He idly wondered if the wood had been cut from the same tree. Other buildings and smaller towers poked above the wall, though not one neared even half the height of the clock tower, standing like a sentinel above it all. 2 mountain slopes rose on either side of the city wall, the red bricks built into the side of the mountains. The slopes looked steep and treacherous, and Emmond wondered if it was possible to enter the city from any direction other than directly on, through the main gate. His heart beat faster in his chest. His vision narrowed. He could hear the birds lilting in the trees around them, heard a deer stamping somewhere off to their right, nervous at their smell. He could feel the shifting of the wind, acutely aware which direction their scent was going, and he knew that he was settling into the focus of the hunter. His fingers felt strong and ready, holding the reins lightly, his leg adjusting with the perfect practice of muscle memory, giving him space to reach for his bow if something came onto the path. He didn't need to think about the movements for tensioning the string, didn't need to check that the quiver was situated so that the open end was near his reach. He already knew these things were so. Relax. He looked to the side and blinked, the woman sitting on the horse next to him breaking his sudden concentration. He came out of it like he was waking up. Everything seemed a little more blurry. Sounds blended into each other, and he felt the need to adjust his weight on Whisper as they rode, so as not to fall off. The moment passed, and he smiled at her. I'm calm, he said. Must we pay to enter the gate? Not I, she answered with a twist of her lip. The gate grew and rose as they neared, shrouding them in the red-bricked might of the wall. The black wood and iron supports filled their vision as they neared, and Catriona slipped from her horse when they were within shouting distance. Emmond did the same, and the pair walked side by side, their horses walking abreast. Catriona Alguaine of Olek Farmstead. She said it not more loudly than a conversation, but the words held a weight and command that Emmond hadn't heard from her before. She was a woman of industry and trade, and he was realizing how deep that ran within her. Welcome, daughter of June, a voice said from somewhere above the black gate. You are early for the opening of the day. We have traveled long and seek no special privileges, but wish for entrance through the porter gate, should your kindness allow. And the man? He is my guard, Catriona said, cutting him off with a slight raise in volume. The roads are not as safe for a woman as they once were. Emmond bit his tongue and tried to look the part, casting his face sullen and grave. He didn't have to try too hard. Aye, brigands are ruthless, certain they are. What business have you in Harbin Point? The same trade that I have carried on for my father, she answered. Aye, good man, June Olek. There was a pause that stretched on and on. Emmond wondered if the man had gone away from his secret window, leaving them abandoned and alone with no promise of when the gates would open. Emmond was about to ask Catriona for clarity when a small black shadow turned out from the side of the wall, hidden where Emmond hadn't seen or looked before. A fat man in a suit of brown leather armor with a tin helm propped crooked on his head stepped out, waving at them. Come on, then, the gate guard said. Catriona gave the slightest bow, nodded once to Emmond, and passed into the gatehouse. Mistress Alguaine, the man said as she passed, matching her bow in a stiff manner Emmond didn't care for. He gave the guard no such courtesy and followed Catriona into the dark interior. It was a short walk through the inner walls of the town, and the light at the other side of the small porter gate led them into a broad courtyard. It was square and walled off on all sides, with a towering open gate opposite the large black one they had just passed. I trust you know your way, the gate guard said, stopping just in front of Catriona. Thank you, yes. She gave a small bow to the man and then walked past him, leading her horse. Emmond nodded to the man as well and walked on, following in silence. They passed under the stone arch and entered the city of Harbin Point. This has been an audio production of Hunter of the Setting Sun by N.N. Shepherd. Music by Josiah Fursanetti. Cover art by Levi Bushnell. Editing by Josiah Fursanetti and Levi Bushnell. Read by the author. Tune in next time for another episode of Hunter of the Setting Sun.